Welcome to another episode of Dr. Kamini Rao's Masterclass. I'm curious to present to you another inspiring person. A doctor, yes. A spiritual person, yes. An agriculturist, yes. And a person who above all is a good human being. I won't hold it any further. This person is none other than Dr. B.S. Srinath, head of Shankara Foundation Cancer. Let's go across to Dr. Srinath and hear from him the multifaceted work that he has been doing, because all of you know that he is an excellent cancer surgeon. But I'm not going to speak about that only. I'll get it out from Srinath what are the other things he's going to do. Welcome, Dr. Srinath.
Thank you, Dr. Kamini Rao, for asking me to be here to this prestigious program. Thank you.
Dr. Srinath, I have always been interested to know that your focus has always been philanthropic. But if I were to just jog your memory back to your early days, you're a family of 9 children. So obviously in a middle class family with 9 children and coming from a rural background, a middle class family for example, there must be a lot of focus on education and perhaps not the kind of luxury that you would get, but yet you got into medicine and you had all the 9 people over there vying for the education. So how did your father and mother manage?
I am from Bhadravati, a village near Bhadravati called Bhadra Colony, which is about 5 miles away. My father was a farmer. He is a qualified person. He was a diploma in agricultural education. And he migrated from Kolar to Bhadravati. When the Bhadravati factory was started, he cleared the forest there and started the agriculture. And we were 9 children in quick succession. In those days, the health care and education about health care was also not available. So it was my father who actually drove the entire family burden, because my mother passed away very young when I was 1.5 years old. So my father's focus was basically on the education, because he believed that education will be the only way through which the children could find their future in life. We used to go to the school there, a government middle school and a government high school. We got our education, but all through it was under the supervision and obviously the focused eye of my father, how we are doing in our education, what we are doing. That was for him the most important thing. That's how we were under scrutiny all the time. So all the children all the other 8 are my elders. They all did well, and it was the focus for us.
Well, you said that your father was a agriculturist, farmer. So obviously his timetable would be that he would get up very early in the morning and reach to his farms, and by the time he came back it was very late. So how did you all manage to look after your studies, and if you had any difficulties? And being in a government school, you didn't have that kind of private tuitions and things like that. So each one teach one. So elder brother taught the younger brother, or the elder sister taught the younger sister. Is that how that bonhomie was?
Yes, actually it is a village. So there were about 10-12 families in the village. In each house there were children who would all go together to the school. We were about 30 children going to the town every day in the morning, and in the evenings we used to have some music classes, some songs being told, and my grandfather used to teach us English, and also he would teach Ramayana, Mahabharata in the spare time. So it was something, the whole village was getting educated in a way. And yes, it is the elders who would actually take care of the youngsters. My father, obviously my father had to work very hard. He was a farmer. Although he employed people, but most of the work he would do himself. and he was a scientific agricultural farmer. So we had animal husbandry, we had cows, buffaloes in the house, we had bullocks, we had horses. So the thing is, it was his time would be spent mostly in the agricultural operations, yet he would spend time on us and particularly keep a keen eye on what we are doing and then tell us that we are wherever we are lacking.
I think that's very good, Srinath, that in spite of having so many children and the fact that your mother passed away when you were very young, 1.5 years is quite a daunting task for a father to look after, and not forgetting 8 in front of you as well. And did your father ever think of marrying again? Because obviously he had to look after this as well as the other part. Whatever servants or whoever you have, it's never like having somebody of your own to bring up the children. A mother's role will always be important. Or he became father and mother to you?
Yes, he actually became both father and mother for all of us. He was a very disciplined man. He was also a spiritual man. He decided that he would not get married. I remember that when I grew up, I had an opportunity just to look up his cupboard, and I found that he had translated Hanumad Vijaya into Kannada, and unfortunately that did not find a print because we didn't have the resources at that time. So my father actually felt that it would be, I don't know what he felt, but one thing he did definitely, that he didn't get married. He decided not to get married. And one of my sisters, they were all young, they were about 15, 14. They were given the responsibility of running the household. And one after the other, as they got married, the responsibility was handed over to the next one. And when my brother got married, then my sister-in-law took over.
That was really good, because I think, in a way, for a woman, donning the mother's role is very easy. But for a man, donning the mother's role is extremely difficult. And also, the problem here would be, it's not a question of one child, 9 children could be a very daunting task. And you tell me that he was very particular about your education and being a farmer. We always think farmers are illiterate, but here you have a farmer who's very intelligent, scientific farming plus looking after children. So he himself wore many caps, and this is where I find is very important.
Yeah, he was a very disciplined man.
Fantastic.
He was very fond of Shakespeare's dramas as well.
Farmer for Shakespeare, that's even better. But going again back with your father, the fact that he was spiritual, what do you mean by spirituality with your father?
You see, he would get up early morning and he would chant the mantras and slokams. In a village, my father would always be scared of opening the door and going out in the early mornings because of thefts and other. All the children would be sleeping in the house. So he would get up at about 4, but wash and come back and sit and chant some slokams, and at about 5:30 in the morning he would bring milk and boil it and prepare coffee for all of us. He would prepare the coffee himself, and after that he would, once we are all awake and we start our work, he would go to the this one and milk all the cows and buffaloes, bring the milk and keep it, and then he would take bath, do the puja, and after that he would have the first cup of coffee and go to the land. That was his routines. He always did that. He always did till his 78th year.
That is really amazing, because what happens is when children see the father doing it, they automatically follow. So he was a person who actually made children follow what he practiced, not only preached, but he actually practiced it. And therefore some of that spirituality rubbed into you because your father was also very spiritual. And I hear that your mother was also extra spiritual. What do you remember, and the hearsay that you hear from your elder brother and all that, about your mother?
My mother was extremely, I am told that my mother was extremely peaceful at home in spite of having so many children, and he was very pious. She was very pious. She used to give medicines to the villagers in those days, and most of the medicines, along with some spiritual prayers, would cure the illnesses. There are many such episodes.
Can you just cite one of that episode of a
Yes,
doctor?
Yeah, one Dr. Gangaya was actually staying opposite our house. He was a government doctor and LMP, and one of his children got fever and then probably febrile convulsions. And they came rushing to my mother, it seems, and they said that he is not conscious. So my mother went to that house, doctor's house, and then sprinkled some water, gave some water to drink, and then smeared some this one, and the child stopped having convulsions, fever stopped, and then the child grew up. Now the child must be about 80 years old. That child later on was named after my mother because of my mother's medicine, and my mother was extremely spiritual, and that also rubbed on my father, because my father also became extremely spiritual, and he practiced till his end, all the time. Regular pujas, and this one, his dedication was very strong. He was focused, and that way I should say he was an achiever. He believed in something and he did it, and he wanted to get the results which he got. So that's how he could somehow be very successful in whatever endeavors that he did, including remaining alone after my mother's death.
Yeah, that is
because that was something like a spiritual determination and a tapasya, which he did.
I think he had so much of positivity from your mother that he didn't need anybody else, because that spirituality is so much of positivity in the atmosphere around him. It's like an aura, and that gives him strength even beyond her presence. I think I've seen this happen. People get that strength because of the kind of positivity that she would. That is the aura, and maybe that's the reason.
I believe so. I believe so. See, the thing is, after my mother's death, my father stopped taking meal in the night. He used to take only one meal a day, and he lived like that for 57 years after my mother's death. So the thing is, I think there is something in that probably my mother had a strong influence on my father's spiritual life, and the other way probably is also true.
That's great. Now, going again back to your early childhood days, they always will say that, did you always have success? Because the kind of image today, Srinath, that you give to the public is that you're a diva and you're the best oncosurgeon, and anything you touch, everything gets cured, because this is the perception of the public. But as a youngster, when you went through school, you also had that positivity till you really got a dhakka. Now, what was that when you were going through school?
Yes, let me tell you this. Everything was fine. It was, after all, a government school. I would go to a government primary school and a middle school in Bhadravati. Then I started going to for high school education. I went to Silver Jubilee High School. Until when I saw cricketers in the field from VISL, the factory was just across. Playing there, I also took interest and I started playing there. Evening would be spent in going to the stadium and then throwing the ball. It started from there, and I started going back to my village late in the evenings. Particularly for my SSLC, it affected very badly. It was the time I was very fond of cricketers in L.T. Subbu, Kasturi Rangan, all big names. So spent most of my time reading about them, collecting sports and pastime photographs and things like that, pinning them up in my books. But then during the examination, I thought I knew everything, but actually when I scored very low marks and barely passed, I got 39 in chemistry, 41 in mathematics and 43 in physics.
Oh my God.
So my father was very upset, and then he said, now is the end of your cricket. Stop doing all this rubbish, start reading. So he started supervising me. So he would wake me up at about 5:30 in the morning, and through the window from the cowshed, he would just observe whether I was reading or not. If I am not reading, he would shout and tell, read loudly, I want to hear. And if I pronounce anything wrong in English, he would tell me, stop it. He would correct the English and say, this is the pronunciation, not that. So that 1 year he spent focusing on what I was doing most of the time. And that prepared me. Also, it gave me an idea as to what my father is expecting out of me. And I started studying. He got me a Robin Hood cycle to go to the high school. Until then, I was walking the distance. So then I got good marks in PUC. That actually led me to go to the medicine.
Yeah, but Srinath, you must understand, your father has been a true father-teacher, all rolled up into one. He didn't punish you because you got this thing, but he showed you the way.
Yes.
And this failure, which I think has actually given you that kind of scare, has actually been a beacon of light to show you where is your success path. So sometimes we tend to become too sure of ourselves, not knowing that we don't know. And this becomes the turning point in your career. I'm also very happy that your father got you a cycle instead of saying, you boy, you failed, now you go walking. Now that would be the usual thing of parents to say, that first punish the child and then let them see, let them suffer. No. I think your father did the right thing by giving you that bike, making sure that you got the right education. I think a lot of those qualities, I think you have imbibed in you, because you have made sure that if there is a mistake, correct the mistake and give that path. That's a true teacher.
It's the love, Dr. Kamini Rao. It was father's love and also his anxiety to actually correct me to the right path. I always remember that, because when I succeeded, he was the most happiest person.
Yes.
And all along my life, he has been something like a beacon for me. I always looked forward for what he would have thought. Even today, when I think of whatever activities I am doing, sometimes when I am alone on my own, I just think what my father would have actually thought about this. Because he was a person who was unselfish, who was very clear in what he wanted to do and what he expected out of his children. And so he was the guide for all of us. Obviously, being alone, we also thought that we should not do anything which my father would not
approve of.
So that's the thing.
But the fact is that he actually molded you in a way that you respect him, and you respected him because he showed you a path. That's what I think. Today also I don't see that kind of parenting. See, parenting definitely means that you should actually get your children in the right path. But today I see a lot of bad parenting where it's always the first rank, otherwise there's no rank beyond the first rank, and if you don't get the first rank, then the child is bad. A father with a teacher in the father and a teacher who becomes a father-like figure looks into, even if there are 30 children, or in your case, there were 9 children. If the 9th child didn't do well, he will concentrate on the 9th child. I mean, he didn't look around and say, oh, all my other 8 children are doing well, so let this boy do whatever he wants. I don't think I have to worry. So for the true teacher in anyone, every student counts and every child counts, and that's what your father demonstrated. This would be an example to all the children and to you particularly.
Very much true, Dr. Rao. In fact, he was a model, a role model. So the thing is, he lived that life. It was easy for us to follow.
Absolutely, because you will be keenly observing
Yes.
that. Now, going through when you got into PUC and you knew your path, so one failure has actually got you into the right path, and then when you did well in PUC, your father thought that you should do agriculture because he had a lot of lands. But suddenly, you know, all the other people sat down, and that was an interesting story. Now, can you just tell us about that?
It so happened that my brother-in-law was here from Orissa and he was returning. We were all in the railway station to see him off, and my father was also there, and I got my marks card and I told everyone that I have scored well in PUC and this is my marks card. There was a discussion. My father was keen that I should go for agriculture because we had lands, BSc agriculture. We had lands, we had cows, buffaloes in the house, everything was going on well. Someone will have to look after that. My elders were already, my immediate elder brother was doing his MBBS in Hubli and the 2 other brothers were engineers. So my father wanted me to take up agriculture. Then the others said, no, the youngest son should not be made to go for agriculture.
Why?
Let him, people will say that the younger boy was actually, the others did not allow him to become a doctor because he has the capability to become a doctor. He should not miss. So my brother, who was doing MBBS, he also said, no, let him do MBBS. My father decided that I should stay close to the house. So he got me a seat in JJM Medical College, Davangere. And I joined there. And my eldest brother resigned from his job and looked after the lands. That is how I was led to do my MBBS, and I did attend the interview for agriculture as well because I had already applied. But they didn't believe that I will join the agricultural college. They told me in the interview that no, you are going for MBBS. Anyway, we will give you the seat, but if you... So I didn't...
So you had to have a choice there.
Choice.
But see, the thing is, destiny drives you into a direction, whether by design or desire. And even though your father had decided, there were other people who just, on the spur of the moment said, get into medicine, because you were destined to do something great in medicine. Service was your motto. So I think, all rolled up into one. I felt that this was actually destined for you. Medicine was destined for you.
Yeah, I believe in destiny, but at that point of time, I was too young to know what I was actually going to be. But one thing was clear, that I thought whatever the decision the elders take, that would be good for me. And another thing was that I was still young. The question was to go to Davangere and join this college there and all that. So there was support from everybody. Look, it's after all 3 hours journey from Bhadravati. You can go by bus and come back. Every weekend you can be home. So I also preferred that. But I believe that everything is predetermined. I believe in destiny. The only thing that one has to shape one's own life, probably supported by one's samskara, and that actually supports your decisions very much. If you have good samskara, then I think rest of the things will fall in line and everything will drive you to the right path easily.
Yeah, but Srinath, you can't say, destiny will drive you without doing hard work. The hard work has to be there. Yes. Destiny can be 1%, 99% of hard work, And it's not that you were just having a free ride and say destiny, destiny. Srinath is not what he is because of destiny. It is your hard work plus destiny. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I mean, one has to do what is needed. But here in Davangere, I should actually tell, I had excellent teachers in MBBS.
That's very important.
They were, to a large extent, they were my models also for the future. So,
excellent.
I should remember Dr. Nagaraj Shetty, Dr. Mahesharappa, Dr. Gauss Ahmad Sharif, who was a disciplinarian, and many other people who were there, I was very fond of them, and they were fond of me as well. And when they taught, it was a very closed, small group. We were only 47 students in the batch. So it was, each one knew the teacher, all the teachers knew the students so well. And the attention was focused. And the students also had to perform well. So that way it helped me.
Excellent.
To focus on my path.
So I think as you passed out of your MBBS and then you decided to get into the post-graduation, what made you do oncology?
One of the things was I left after my MS in PGI. I decided to work in a charitable hospital in Kerala. From there I went to Cardiff, UK actually. Then I was in a district general hospital, and I got an opportunity. I did my primary FRCS and then went to University Hospital of Wales. The professor there was interested in oncology. Cardiff is one of the 4 centers for breast diseases in UK. The department's focus was on breast cancer, early reconstruction, and benign breast diseases, inflammatory bowel disease and colonic cancer. So I was in the professorial unit as an SHO initially, and then I became a registrar there after I completed my fellowship. And so there I saw my interest in oncology started. And my research was also into the field of oncology because of that surgical unit.
But then, having looked at the Western type of education, because I have been abroad myself, and I also see the difference between the education there and the education in India. How do you find the education there different to the education that we have in India?
Oh, it's very much different.
How?
It is there. The lot of education is through doing. It is a practical learning. Lot of education in India is theory based. Although we have so much of clinical material, the focus is more on theory. I do not know for what reason. Yourself, you have done fellowship there, you know what it is like. Even in the examinations, examiners ask practical questions, what you do, how you do on the operating table, and what decisions you make, which will have an impact on the patient's health. So that one thing I have noticed. The other thing is largely you are left alone to yourself to work. Didactic lectures are not there. So there is a big difference between, and it is more research oriented. Here research is meant only for someone to submit his dissertation or thesis. Other than that, there is nothing like research here going on. At that particular time, there was nothing here totally. I mean, I came back from there. Another important thing that I felt after my return, fortunately I was not there for many years. I was only there for 3 years. And I had not missed much of India when I was there. I decided that I don't belong there, I should come back. I came and joined Kidwai. In those 3 years that I was there, I noticed that the patients were very comfortable, looked after by National Health, all drugs given, all food given. Even the nurses would go to the patients' houses and deliver the food and drugs and medications. Ambulances are arranged for the patients to be shifted to the hospital. I came to Kidwai, I felt that the patients were totally on their own. It is nothing much has changed even today. Unfortunately, it's almost 40 years. They were being given food which was in an aluminium plate, some sambar and some bulk vegetables, some rice, brown rice, twice a day. And they had to sleep in the corridors and this one. Maybe at that time, and there were no medicines they had to get themselves other than B complex, APC and things like that. Everything else they had to purchase. So it was just not, and the villagers who come from far away, whether winter, rain or sun, they had no place to go other than spend most of the day under the trees. So when I came back, it was a shock for me. Although I was very much here just 3 years earlier, the difference actually was very clear to me that something has to happen for this healthcare. We should at least give some better treatment, if not as good as what we see in NHS in UK. Something better than that should happen to our patients. So that's where I started. I started asking patients in Kidwai to write down. I gave them pencil and a Kalanidhi pocket calendar to write down the daily expenditure every day, and then let me know how much money they spend and how do they arrange, because I didn't want them bring some money, drink away in the evenings and then come and sleep in the dharmashala and then say that there is no money for treatment. That is where I started looking after this aspect, the management aspect of cancer care. It was a big difference. This is not actually, we take the patient's issues lightly. I mean, their needs are not actually addressed.
I agree with you, Srinath, but in the UK, most of the treatment is patient-centric. How does the patient feel? And you talk to the patient by their name, and then you welcome them inside when you talk to them, and also an appointment is given. So every time the patient comes, you don't go on saying, what's your problem? So there's a continuity. Whereas when in India, every time you will say, what's the problem? Because there is no continuity in the follow-up.
Yes.
The second thing that I've noticed also from the UK here, when you go there, the standard operating procedures are all laid out, so in that framework you work and you're able to do it. But that was a culture shock, because we were not used to documenting. So by the time you get to document, because here the volumes were more, documentation was unheard of. Whereas you go there, the patient load was less and documentation was more. I had forgotten the way you document, so I had to improve my writing to get everything done. And from there I come back here and again I am into the same rubbish. So I felt, in both ways a little bit of Western education is required, but because of the population here, you can't actually duplicate that into this. As long as our population is not controlled, we are going to have this, because ours is a poor country.
I agree. We are overwhelmed by the number of patients that we have to see every day.
Absolutely.
So the thing is, our focus actually gets totally diluted. The doctor here is a nurse,
Yes.
is a counselor, is a brother. He has to provide, the patient expects that food is also to be provided by the doctor. I don't blame them, because when they come from far away, those needs, before we start treating them, we need to meet those needs. And no government can actually do it, because it's a very large volume. We were not at that time, definitely we were not prepared. Healthcare still remains, even today, a private enterprise, in the sense 80% of only 18 to 20% of the patients are insured. In our country, 80% pay from their out-of-pocket expenditure. They have to spend money. And with 70% of the people in rural areas, it is a challenge. that has remained more or less the same, because the efforts that we are putting has only scratched the surface, because the number of patients are increasing. It is our efforts are not commensurate with the increasing workload. So we are running behind our targets. We have never gone ahead of it and encountered it squarely. So that is the problem. Unless we actually take a major share, the government decides that they will take care of the society and provide that leadership, this problem will remain. Doctors will have to be a philosopher, guide, educator, food provider, drug provider, and also treatment provider.
All rolled into one.
All rolled into one. That is the society today. I think it will remain the same, because one another thing I want to tell you is the nursing in UK or in USA is highly evolved. After my training here, I went to UK. The first posting was in orthopedic surgery. So early morning I went and I said, staff, can I actually have the trolley? I want to do the dressing. I want to see the wound. The nurse said, I still remember, her name is Sister York. She said, at that time I was still a doctor, not a mister. So she said, doctor, that is our role. We will do it. We will take care. We will call you if it is necessary. We will show you the wound. The nurses will do it. You don't have to worry. For the first time, I was taught a lesson, because in India, every patient I would operate, I would only do the dressing. I will only remove the sutures. And even today, the patients expect that the surgeon who operates should remove the sutures. Now the thing is, there for the first time I saw how well organized and educated. In the intensive care, the nurses themselves would manage most of the issues that the patient gets into. But here, they still, even today, the doctors will have to take care. So the thing is, because of this, whether doctors themselves have brought it upon themselves to be the most important people in healthcare, or whether the others involved in healthcare have not taken the leadership to support and provide a good healthcare, whether nursing has not improved, whether management has not improved. If that is the cause for why the doctors will have to take greater responsibility in today's healthcare, I do not know. But then it may be a combination of all. The doctors have not actually given that space for the nursing and others to come in and do it, or whether the patient's expectations is such that the doctors only should take care of everything and their faith in them is more. These are all issues which can definitely be discussed, but I think it's a mixture of everything.
I think it's a combination, like what you said. I think doctors don't want to give up their importance. Secondly, the nursing education here is varied, from very good nursing schools to very bad nursing schools. In fact, the ones that come out of these spurious nursing schools, they don't even know how to give an injection. So if you can't even trust a person to give an injection and even read the label, how do you trust them to do anything better? And the nurses' lifespan in any hospital is very limited. Yes. Another 10 rupees extra and then they just move into another hospital. So doctors also feel that how long is this woman going to stay in our place? And if you train her, again it's a trained hand somewhere else. So this fear factor and the trust factor deficiency is something that is actually a vicious cycle. That's actually the cause for all this. And I think until we have a satisfactory number of nurses, uniform training, we're not going to be able to take this forward. This is the bane of everything. And we don't have junior doctors here who are qualified. And if you don't have junior doctors that are qualified, then the senior doctor has to do it. And the senior doctor themselves don't want to give up their importance.
Yeah, I can't agree more with you.